Good day everyone. Today I'm going to discuss the continuation of our third topic, which is all about the entity relationship diagram. On our previous video, I already discussed the different the basics of entity relationship diagram. Now let us continue with the entity relationship diagram optionality. I would also like to thank Inch Powell for providing these instructional materials that I downloaded at SlideShare. Okay, so thank you for that. And now let's continue with our discussion. So it says here, no? Now, when we show relationships between tables as well as the cardinality, we also need to show the optionality. On my previous video, I already discussed to you the different cardinality. For example, are the one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-one, and many-to-many. Those are the different cardinalities, no? But now, we are going to focus on the optionality. So it says here on the second bullet that depending on the data we are storing, there are several options that we need to choose from. Okay? So the cardinality, as I've mentioned a while ago, shows what type of relationship. So for example, here we have the one-to-one, and then we also have the one-to-many, and then the rest. Okay, but does not state whether this is a mandatory or optional relationship. I also discussed to you the difference of the mandatory and optional relationship, but I'm going to discuss it again in order for us to have a clear understanding of the following. So the mandatory and optional here, we call them optionality. But the cardinality are those one-to-one, one-to-many, many-to-one, and many-to-many. I hope we can differentiate it. No? We will be able to differentiate the cardinality and optionality. Okay, so it says here on the mandatory relationship, a mandatory relationship is where there must be, okay, so we have to take note this one, there must be at least one matching record in each entity. So, we have the word must. Okay, yung clue nyo na kung pag sinabing mandatory, we have the words must and we can also use the word should. Yan. Mandatory means kailangan. And then we also have the optional. Okay? Optional relationship is where there may or may not be a matching record in each entity. So here on the optional relationship, it also made use of the word may or may not. Meaning hindi siya mandatory, hindi siya required. Okay? And then we can also make use of the word might. At saka might not. Okay? Ayun po yung mga words na nag-identify ng ating mga optionality. So, for mandatory, we have must. Ayan. Should. Pwede po yun. Pag optional, we have may, may not, might. Ayan. Yung mga words na yon. Okay. So, let's proceed, no? So, the relationship is shown with a connecting line between the entities. As you can see, we have here the connecting line that connects to the entity A, and we also have the entity B. But as you can see, we have the entities, no? Hindi po rectangle yung ginamit nilang shape. But it's okay because I will be showing you later on an example that uses this particular shape. Para saan kaya tong shape na to? Bakit hindi kaya rectangle yung ginamit ni ma'am? Okay? Or ginamit dito sa instructional material. So, sabi niya, it is being connected with line. And doon sa typical na mga ERD na pinakita ko sa inyo na sample to illustrate the different cardinalities, there is a relationship. But later on, we are going to discuss kung paano yung paggawa ng ERD or kung paano yung ERD pag merong relationship. But on my previous examples naman, I've presented some examples na merong diamond, no? Which represents the relationship. But here, we will only focus on the optionality, no? Whether it is a mandatory or optional relationship. So, as you can see, we are going to use lines or connecting lines between the entities. it says here on the other bullet that the cardinality is shown by the use of crow's feet or lines. Okay, so entity A is being connected to entity B using the lines, and then also the cardinality is shown by the use of crow's feet or lines. Po yung cardinality po natin, no, yung 1 to 1, 1 to many, many to 1, mga ganun po. This one po, itong mga nandito sa side. I already presented the different symbols that we can use here on the ERD optionality. But if we are talking about cardinality, we have this one. So, ang ating cardinality dito ay 1 to many, because this is the symbol for many, no? 1 to many po tayo. But it says here that, but it does not state whether this is a mandatory or optional relationship. Hindi pa daw sinasabi dito sa ating example dito sa entity A and entity B kung mandatory or optional po yung relationship niya, kasi yung nakalagay lang po dito na being represented by lines or the crossfit is just the cardinality, which is yung cardinality ng example natin is 1 to many. Okay, paano nga ba? Paano nga ba natin ma-identify yung optionality niya? Okay, so it says here that the optionality is shown inside the cardinality. I repeat, the optionality is shown inside the cardinality. So as you can see here, we also have an example, entity A and then entity B. It is being connected with a line, and as you can see, meron tayong mga different symbols that I presented before. Okay, so these are considered as included on the crossfit, no? Crossfit because it uses lines to represent the cardinality and then optionality. Makikita nyo naman po dito yung blue na line dito na nakakonect from entity A to entity B, at sinasabi niya or pinipinpoint niya yung kung alin dyan yung cardinality at alin dyan yung optionality natin. So itong cardinality natin ay nandito siya sa part na ito. So ito yung cardinality na entity A, 1, and then sa may entity B, many. Okay, I repeat, the cardinality is here. For entity A is 1, for entity B is many. And then we also have the optionality here. Okay, yung optionality natin, nandito siya. Okay, 1. Yung mga being represented also with this symbol. So this is mandatory, no? The symbol is mandatory. And then on the entity B, this one is optional. I repeat, the entity A, yung optionality niya ay mandatory. And then we also have the entity B, ang optionality niya ay optional. So, 1, yan, mandatory 1, and then optional many. I repeat, ang entity A natin is mandatory 1, and then entity B natin is optional many. I hope hindi po tayo ma-confuse later on sa pag-identify ng cardinality at saka optionality. Okay. So, here, let's proceed, no? A mandatory relationship is shown with a vertical line next to the cardinality. So, as I've mentioned a while ago, it's here, no? Ito po yung ating cardinality, and then dito sa tabi niya, ito po yung optionality po natin. It says here on the mandatory relationship that must be at least one entity. I repeat, must be at least one entity. And then, dito naman po sa ating optional relationship, it is shown with a hollow circle next to the cardinality. So, there may be 0 to many of entity B. So, as you can see, it made use of the word or of the number 0 kasi may or may not nga siya. Okay, so pwedeng marami, pwedeng hindi. Yun po yung thought nito kasi ang ating relationship is optional many. Here is the cardinality, which is many, and then yung optionality natin ay optional. So, optional many po yung entity B po natin. So, yun po yung pagkakaiba ng ating relationship na mandatory at saka optional. I hope nakukuha po natin. This is also the explanation or the breakdown of this particular example, no? Okay, so let's proceed. So, it says here that there are several types, no, na pwede nating i-consider. Consider the optionality of the next few examples when combined with cardinality. Okay, so etong mga example na to, kailangan nating i-take note. Bakit? Kasi ito yung magiging basis natin mamaya kung paano natin malalaman yung yung optionality ng ating, or ito yung magiging explanation niya kung bakit ganito yung symbols na ginamit dito. Okay? So, ito po yung basis natin. Wag na wag po natin kakalimutan ito mga different types ng ating relationship. So, as you can see here, we have the first one. It says here that at least one entity. Dito makikita ninyo na ang kanyang cardinality ay many. I repeat, yung cardinality niya ay many, and then yung optionality niya ay mandatory. So, if I'm going to read this one, mandatory, many. Okay? So, sabi niya, at least one entity. And then, dito naman po sa pangalawa, we have two lines. And then, it says here, dito sa baba, sabi niya, one and only one entity. Okay? I repeat, one and only one entity. So, as you can see, ang kanyang cardinality ay 1 at ang kanyang optionality ay mandatory. So, if I'm going to read this one, mandatory 1. Okay? Next one, the third one, we also have this one. Sabi niya, none or one entity. I repeat, none or one entity. Wala or isa. O yan. Sabi niya, gumamit siya ng word na or. Okay, meaning, optional po siya. Okay? So, as you can see, the cardinality here on the third example, it made use of this symbol, meaning 1. And then, nandito tayo sa pag pumunta po tayo dito sa may optionality niya, ang ginamit niya ay optional. So, if I'm going to read this one, optional 1. Okay? So, may I repeat, none or one entity. And then, dito naman po sa pang-apat, yan, sabi niya, maybe none. O, yan, meron din tayong word dito na maybe. Yan, pag merong maybe, di ba, if they are going to ask you, do you like me? Ayan, meron tayong dalawang answers na ina-expect. It's either yes or no. But, meron tayong word na maybe. So, optional. Either yes, either no. Okay? So, it is optional. So, sabi niya, maybe none, or one, or more than one entity. Okay, so kanina, i-compare lang natin dito sa my left, yung nandito, ang nilagay niya lang kasi na option dito is none or one. Okay, so optional or one. Pero dito sa may pang-apat, sabi niya, maybe none, pareho lang dito sa pangatlo, or one, pareho pa din, pero meron siyang in-insert na more than one, no? Or more than one. So, ilagay natin yung many po dito. Okay? So, yung cardinality po natin ay many, pero hindi siya mandatory. Siya ay isang optional. So, kung babasahin po natin yan, magiging optional many. I hope na kuha po natin itong several types po ng ating relationship. So, we have mandatory many, mandatory one. We also have optional one, and then optional many. Okay? So, let's proceed, no? Okay, nandito na yung mga examples para mas maintindihan po natin. We have the following examples. So, I'm going to minimize this one, and then, I'm going to flash this one here para meron po tayong basis para mas maintindihan po natin. Kasi nga, sabi ko kanina, this will be our basis in order for these examples to be explained. Okay, so here are the examples for mandatory. So, we have two particular entities. We have the customer and then yung order po natin. So, as you can see, ang kanyang cardinality for customer is 1. Ang cardinality ng order ay many. And then, ang optionality ng customer ay mandatory at ang optionality naman ng order ay mandatory din po. So, kung babasahin natin yung entity ng customer, mandatory 1 at yung order po natin is mandatory many. Okay? So, let's have this. May I just explain? It says here on the bullet that one customer, okay, I repeat, one customer has made at least one order. One customer has made at least one order. So, present po yung ating dalawang entities dito. Yung entity ni customer at yung entity ni order. So, unahin po natin yung entity ni customer. Sabi niya, one customer. If you are going to base here, dito sa left side, dun sa different types niya, hanapin lang po natin dito kung saan swak yung case scenario na binigay po dito. Sabi niya, one customer. Okay, wala na po siyang follow-up. If we are going to check here on the several types, papasok kaya itong this one, the first one? Kasi sabi niya, at least one entity. Pag sinabi kasing at least one entity, kahit isa lang. Pwedeng marami, pero kahit isa lang, basta merong isa. Hindi pwedeng ma-zero yan. Dapat merong isa. Pero yung isa naman, dito sa pangalawa, isa lang. Okay? Isa. Okay? And then, mandated na isa. And then, dito naman, meron tayong optional. Pwedeng wala or isa. Dito naman sa pang-apat, pwedeng wala, pwedeng isa, pwedeng marami. Okay? So, here on the example, sabi niya, one customer. Saan kaya siya papasok? Okay, if you're going to base here on dito sa left side, dito sa several types niya, dito po siya papasok sa may one and only one entity. Kasi nga sabi niya, one customer. So, ang simple na gagamitin natin is the mandatory one. Ang cardinality niya ay one. And then, ang optionality niya ay one. So, isusulat lang natin dito sa may customer yung one at saka one. And then sabi niya, has made at least one order. We have the word na at least. Please take note of this para mas alam po natin, no? Para hindi po tayo mahirapan sa pag-identify later on. Okay, sabi niya, has made at least one order. Going back dito sa left side, saan kaya dito ang may word na at least one? Okay? So, if we are going to check the different types, no, dito siya papasok. Okay? Dito sa first na type. So, yung symbol po natin dito, yung cardinality niya ay many, and then yung optionality niya ay one. So, yun po yung isusulat natin dito sa may part ni order. Pero, binaliktad lang kasi first entity itong nilagyan ng ganito sa may left side na entity. Pero, pag sa right side na entity, ganun pa din po, babaliktarin lang po natin. So, tama na, no? So, we already have the answer here, no? Nilagay na po dito. So, the explanation is also here. As you can see, sabi niya, one order is for only one customer. Okay, so yan po yung pinaka-essence nung first example natin sa ating mandatory. Okay, if in order for you to have an easier way on how to identify later on kung ano yung ilalagay ninyong cardinality at optionality, mag-base lang po tayo dito sa my left side. Ayan. So, and then, i-evaluate po natin yung kanyang description later on. Okay? So, let's proceed naman. Here is an example also of an optional or optional po na optionality. Okay? So, we also have two entities here. We have the entity protected species, and then we also have the entity reptile. Okay, dalawa po yung entity po natin. And then yung cardinality ng protected species is 1. Ang cardinality ng reptile ay many. Ang optionality ng species ay optional. Ang cardinality ng reptile ay also optional. Okay, so let us let us explain this example, no? Yung optional na example po natin. It says here on the second bullet that one protected species record may be for none. One or many kept reptiles. Okay, may repeat. One protected species record may be for none. If you're going to, pagbabalik po tayo dito, ayan, if we're going to go back here, meron po tayong word dito na may be for none. Ayan, maybe for none. So, sino ba dito ang may maybe for none? Dalawa, di ba? We have here the optional one. Meron din po tayong optional many. But, yung clue natin dito kasi, yung third na type natin is none or one lang siya. Etong fourth natin is maybe none, one, or more than one. Yun yung pagkakaiba nila. Dito sa example natin dito sa may optional, sabi niya one, protected species, yun na yung clue niya, one. And then, maybe for none. So, dalawa lang yung minention niya, one at saka none. Kaya, if we're going to go back here, dito sa several type, ito po yung kinuha niya, or ito po yung swak doon sa evaluation natin. One at saka none lang po yung na-mention. Okay? So, if you're going to place it sa ating ERD, ang kanyang cardinality dito po ay 1, and then yung optionality niya ay optional. So, sinulat po dito, optional 1. Ayan. Okay? And then, we also have a comma there to separate yung protected species at saka yung reptile pag in-evaluate natin. So, sabi niya, one or many kept reptiles. So, if we're going to evaluate it again dito sa right side, dito sa left side natin, dito sa several types, dito po papasok yun kasi sabi niya, pwedeng none, pwedeng one, pwede ring more than one. Okay? So, ito po yung example natin, no? Okay, so, sabi niya, one or many kept reptiles, isulat na po natin. Pabaliktad lang po, no? Yung pagsulat dito sa may fourth na example natin. Okay, pabaliktad lang po yung pagsulat, kaya ang ilalagay natin ay optional many. Okay? So, kung meron pa itong type basis natin dito, mapapadali na po yung pagsusulat natin or pag-recreate natin ng ating ERD, lalo na yung pagsusulat ng ating cardinality at saka optionality. Okay, so dito sa baba sabi niya, one reptile may or may not have a protected species record. That is now the evaluation. Okay? So, kung meron tayong mandatory, meron tayong optional, of course, meron din tayong ma-encounter later on na mix. So, this is an example of mix. Okay? So, we have two entities again. We have the entity category. We also have the entity na product. Okay? So, ang kanyang cardinality ni category ay 1, and then ang product natin, ang cardinality niya ay many. So, 1 to many. And then, yung ating optionality kay category ay 1 or mandatory, ang optionality ni product ay optional. So, if I'm going to read this, dito sa may category, if I'm going to read it, magiging mandatory 1. Pag binasa ko naman itong product, mandatory many. Okay? So, let us evaluate it again. According to the second bullet, it says here that one category may have none. I repeat, one category may have none, one, or many products. So, here, on the second bullet, na-emphasize po dito sa may dito sa may second bullet, yung dalawa, no? Yung dalawang entities natin, entity category, and then yung entity na products. So, meron na naman po tayong clue dito. Sabi niya, one category. One category. So, as you can see, ang nandito sa ating several type, yan, if we're going to choose one, wala yung word na at least. Yan, wala yung at least na word. Pero, meron yung one. Okay, one and only one entity. Kaya sabi niya, one category. So, ang i-choose po natin ay ito. Yung cardinality niya ay 1, ang optionality niya ay mandatory. So, isusulat natin under kay category na entity. And then, sabi niya, may have none, one, or many products. Pertaining po dito sa products, no? Itong none, one, or many products. Si product po ang idine-direct niya. Okay, so saan na naman po siya suswak dito sa may types natin? Okay, so dito po siya papasok sa may fourth type because sabi niya dito, maybe none, one, or more than one or yung sinasabi nating many. Kasi two or more is many na siya, no? Okay, so isusulat po natin ito yung cardinality niya na many and then yung optionality niya na optional. So, sabi niya dito sa may evaluation natin, so one product will have one product will have one and only one category. Yan po yung evaluation natin. Okay? I hope nakuha po natin yung examples ng mandatory, ng optional, at saka yung mix. Just have this one, no, as your basis later on para mas mabilis or mapabilis po yung pagsulat natin ng or pag-identify ng cardinality at saka ng optionality. Okay, so let's proceed, no? These are also examples. Later on, you will be encountering some scenario and then you're going to create an entity. At least you will be trained and you know already how to write later on the cardinality and optionality. So it says here on our scenario, sabi dito sa ating scenario na a small hire car firm has several cars. Ayan, may mga sasakyan daw siya. Ang isang car firm, madami daw siyang mga sasakyan. Ayan, may mga sasakyan siya. So the company ensures that the cars they buy have an initial service. So each car is serviced regularly. Records are kept of each car and each service. Okay. So, we have here an example, no? Meron tayong example dito ng kanyang representation, no, ng ating ERD. So, we have two entity here that we need to consider. If you're going to understand the common scenario or the given scenario, meron tayong dalawang entities po dito. Yung first entity niya, of course, ay yung car at yung kanyang second entity is service. Okay. So, yung cardinality na nakalagay po dito ay 1 and then, yung kanyang cardinality naman sa may service ay many. So, yung relationship natin is 1 to many relationship. So, sabi niya dito, basahin lang po natin, in the scenario, there will always be at least one service record for a car. Ayan. It made use of the word at least one. So, if we're going to go back here, no, ito na yung ito na yung iisipin natin, no? Iisipin natin na ilalagay dyan. But, let us proceed kung paano niya inatake itong example na ito. Okay, so may I just repeat? In the scenario, there will always be at least one service record for a particular car. If a service has been recorded, then it must have a matching car record. So basically, etong ating case scenario daw is a mandatory relationship. Bakit? Kasi po, ang isang car or ang isang sasakyan, dapat daw meron siyang at least one na service record. At ang isang service, no, should have a matching car. Ayan, if we're going to check this one, meron siyang mga arrow for us to know, no, bakit kaya naging mandatory. Kasi po, no, as you can see, yung entity na car natin, which is being included dito na 1, yung kanyang cardinality, kailangan daw meron siyang at least one na service. Going back dito, no, gumamit siya ng word na at least one. Yan, napakadali na ngayon na i-check dito, no, kung alin yung kanyang type, kung paano yung cardinality and optionality niya. Pero titignan natin mamaya kung tama ba kaya. Okay, kung tama ba kaya yung iniisip natin na sagot. Okay, so ito siya. Ang kanyang cardinality ay 1, ang cardinality ni service ay many. So let us now check kung ano yung magiging sagot pag nilagyan natin ng optionality. Okay, dito sa ating optionality, let's just go back dito sa may ano natin, ha. Dito sa may scenario natin, ulitin lang natin na basahin. A small hire car firm has several cars. The company ensures that the cars they buy have an initial service. So, each car, okay, pag sinabing each car, sa isang sasakyan, ay meron siyang service. Sa isang sasakyan, meron siyang service. And then, records are kept of each car. Yan, gumamit na naman siya ng each and each service. Okay? So, going back here, meron na tayong, alam na natin na mandatory relationship siya. So, it says here, meron tayong, meron siyang additional na optionality. Okay, dito sa bullet, sabi niya, one car has one or more service records. Kasi gumamit siya ng word na each. Okay, so each, isa. Okay, sa tigi-isang car. So, one car has one or more service records. If we are going to consider etong sinabi niya na one car, okay, regardless yung sinabi niya dito na at least one, kasi dito na tayo magbe-base. Kasi pag sinabing at least one, ano ang kukunin natin? Ito, okay, etong entity na ito, at least one, magiging mandatory many. Pero ang ginamit kasi natin is each car. Okay, meaning, isa lang. Okay? So, yung one car ay papasok dito sa type na ito. One and only one entity. So, ang gagamitin natin na optionality ay mandatory. At ang relationship or yung natin, kung babasahin natin siya is mandatory one. Okay? I repeat, yung car natin ay one car. Sabi niya kasi gumamit tayo ng each. Kaya ang gagamitin natin na type ay yung second type, yung one and only one entity. At yung gagamitin natin na optionality ay mandatory. Ngayon, i-consider natin to. Sabi niya, has one or more service records. So, going back to the type, ano yung one or more? Okay? Yung merong one or more na service records. As you can see, ang cardinality na ginamit natin dito sa my service ay many. Kasi sabi niya, has one or more service records. Okay? Pero, sabi niya, bakit kaya hindi siya papasok dito kasi meron naman dito none, one, more than one. Ayan, dito sana siya papasok. Kasi po, hindi siya gumamit ng word na magko-consider as optional. Ano ba yung mga words na yon? Maybe. Ayan, may, might, yung mga words na yon. Okay? Hindi siya naglagay. Sabi niya, one car has one or more service records. Gumamit siya ng has, meaning mandated siya. Kailangan, required. Okay? So it says here, one service record is for only one car record. So it says here that a car has one or more service records. Dito po siya papasok. At least one entity. Hindi po pwedeng, kahit madami yan, kahit madami siya, pero hindi dapat mabakante. Hindi dapat na none. Kasi dito sa my fourth example natin, none yung nilagay niya. Meron siyang none Pwedeng mabakante. Pero dito sa first na type natin, hindi pwedeng mabakante. Basta merong at least one na mafe-fill. Kaya dito sa example natin dito, at least merong isa. Pero kinonsider niya or nilagay niya one or more service records. So, ang magiging pag binasa na natin ito, yung cardinality niya ay many, ang kanyang optionality ay mandatory, babasahin natin mandatory one. So, if you're going to give our last evaluation, ang sasabihin natin is one service record is for only one car record. Okay, so mandatory po yung ating relationship. Okay, so if you're going to compare na yung yung example natin doon sa database, it says here the records might be held like this. So as you can see here, we have a PK or primary key natin na car ID, and then meron din siya mga other entities dito. And then we also have the service, meron tayong primary key dito na service ID. And as you can see, meron tayong foreign key dito at ang kinuha niya ay yung car ID. So, I already explained to you the difference between primary key and car ID doon sa ating topic 3 or the first part of this discussion. But if you happen to forget or if you miss some points, just go back on our previous video. Okay? So, ito po yung example natin, no? With the mandatory relationship na merong case scenario. Okay, kasi sabi niya, in the scenario, there will always be at least one service record for a car. And then dito sa evaluation niya, one service record is for only one car record. Okay? Okay, so we also have this one, no? So sabi niya, look at all of your relationships in turn. Okay, we have the entity A, and then we also have the entity B. Meron siyang cardinality na 1 si entity A, merong cardinality na many si entity B. So sabi niya, this is a one to many relationship. Tama, one to many. Okay? And then, we also have this one, no? We have one mandatory, one, at least one, no? And then, dito naman, meron siyang optionality, kaya mandatory many. And then, we also have the one, and then optional many. And then, we also have the one, and then optional many. And then, we also have the mandatory one for entity A, and then optional many for entity B. And we also have the optional one for entity A here. Ganito po yung pagbasa. And then, we also have the optional many. Okay? So, those are the things, no? Under the ERD optionality. So, we have two. Just a recap. We have the mandatory and optional relationship under the ERD optionality. So, if you are going to write later on, no? If you're going to encounter some scenarios, please try to consider also the words, no? Yung mga words na ginagamit, just like for optional, meron tayong may or may not. Tsaka meron din tayong might, yung mga ganon. And then pag mandatory naman, we made use of must and then should. And then if we're going to consider this one also, itong ating different types, titignan po natin kung at least one entity ba siya. Pag sinabing at least one, pwedeng madami, pero kailangan kahit isa lang meron. Ayan, pero pwedeng madami. And then we also have this entity na mandatory one. Sabi niya, one and only one entity. Ayan. Okay, so pag na-encounter nyo na yung one car, one house, okay, yung mga ganon, one department. Ayan. So, dito na siya magfo-fall. Pag sinabi namang none or one entity, optional one tayo. Okay, yung pagkakaiba lang niya dito ay, dito sa may optional many ay more than one entity. Meron siyang word na more than one entity. Okay, so those are the ERD optionality. I hope po nakuha po natin. So now let's proceed to the example, no? Ito. Okay, this is a simple example of an ERD na meron na tayong nilagay na relationship. So as you can see, no, basahin ko lang or identify lang natin yung mga different na entities po dito. So we have the entity supervisor, we have the entity department, entity employee, and then entity na project. And then, meron tayong relationship na tatlo. Meron tayong run by, is assigned, and then works on. Okay, dito sa may department, dito sa may supervisor, unahin natin supervisor. Dito sa may supervisor na entity, meron siyang mandatory one as the optionality and cardinality. And then, itong department, meron din tayong mandatory one. And then, dito sa may part na ito, yung department natin is mandatory many. And then, dito sa may employee, mandatory many also. And then, dito sa employee sa part na ito, dito sa relationship na to, we have mandatory many. And then, for project, we have optional many. Okay, so let us evaluate each one of them. Unahin po natin dito, no? Itong una, itong nasa taas, we have the department, run by, at saka supervisor. As you can see, meron tayong cardinality na 1, and then optionality na 1. Pareho lang siya sa may supervisor. So, if we are going to read this one, pupunta tayo dito sa may several types. Sabi niya, one and only one. So, it means a one department will run by one supervisor. Okay? I repeat, one department will be run by or will run by one supervisor. Isa lang daw po yung supervisor na magsusupervise sa isang department. And kung babaliktarin natin ito, unahin natin supervisor, no? So, one supervisor will run a one department. Okay, hindi daw pwede na maraming supervisor sa isang department. So, iisa lang. So, ang ginamit niya ay mandatory one. Pareho lang din po dito, mandatory one. So, one department run by one supervisor, and one supervisor will run one and only one department. Okay, so that is the explanation for the first. So, possible po na ganito, no, branching. Meron siya mga branch. Kasi doon sa database nyo later on, if you're going to create a database for your system, some tables are also connected with each other. So, ganito po yung pag-recreate ng ating ERD later on. But this is just a simple example. I will be showing you a more complex example later on. So, I think I prepared 4 examples. And then, we also have this one. So, sabi niya, department is assigned to employee. Considering again the cardinality and optionality, gumamit siya ng mandatory many. Okay, bakit kaya mandatory yung department natin? Okay, so sabi niya pag nandito, no, at least one entity. Pwedeng marami, pero kailangang merong isa, hindi pwedeng mabakante. So, ang isang department daw ay kailangang or dito muna tayo sa may employee. Ang isang employee daw ay kailangang ma-assign sa isang department. Okay? So, mandatory daw na yung department natin ay ma-assign sa employee. Hindi pwedeng mabakante. I repeat, sa isang department, merong naka-assign na mga employee, pero hindi pwedeng mabakante. At least merong isa na naka-assign sa kanya. At yung employee natin, at least meron siyang department na naka-assign din sa kanya. So, vice versa po tayo, no? Pareho sila ng kanilang relationship. Ayan, pareho ng cardinality, pareho ng optionality. Kasi, hindi pwedeng mabakante itong department, no? At least one. Pwedeng magkaroon ng madaming employee ang ating department, hindi lang pwedeng mabakante. At least merong isa. Pati rin dito sa may employee natin, ganun din po. Pwedeng sa inyong mga employee, ayan, maraming mga employee, pero at least meron isang department na naka-assign sa inyo. Okay? So, dito naman tayo sa may pangatlo, no? Meron tayong dalawang entities ulit. Meron tayong employee at saka yung project. Okay, so let's start naman dito sa may employee. Ang kanyang type dito ay yung at least one entity. And then, yung relationship na nakalagay dito ay works on. And then, sabi niya dito sa may project is optional many. So, yung employee natin, ayan, yung employee natin must work on optional many project. Okay, yung employee natin, bakit kaya optional many? So, ito yung kino-consider niya na case scenario. Pwedeng yung employee daw ay magtrabaho ng wala, kahit wala siyang project. Pwedeng isa, pwedeng marami. So, optional many yung nakalagay dito. Pero, ang isang project, yan, ang isang project is being worked on, ayan, yan, mandatory many. Bakit kaya ito yung pinili? yung project, pabaliktad tayo. Project is being worked on or worked by mandatory many employee. Bakit kaya? Kasi dito sabi niya, at least one entity. Yung isang project, hindi pwedeng walang mag-work or walang magtrabaho doon. Sa isang project, kahit isa lang yung nag-work. Pwedeng madami, pero kahit at least isa lang. That is why, ang nilagay dito is, this one, yung cardinality niya ay many, and then, yung yung optionality niya ay mandatory. So, if you are going to read it, ganito po siya. Employee works on project. Ayan. So, i-consider natin itong nasa side. And then, project is being worked on or is being worked by, ayan, dito naman tayo ngayon sa employee. Ito naman yung part na ito. So, employee works on optional many project and project works on or is being worked on mandatory many employee. Okay? So, ganun po yung pag-read or pag-evaluate sa ating example. If you are being confused or nako-confuse kayo, no? So, dito, pag nako-confuse kayo, ganito lang po yung gawin ninyo. I-evaluate niyo siya. Tagalogin natin, no? Ang isang employee, ayan, ay mag-work ng kahit one or more or kahit walang project. Okay? Yung project natin, yan, siya ay mawo-work on or iwo-work ng ating employee. Pero, kahit hindi sila marami, kahit isa lang dapat yung gagawa sa project na yun. I hope hindi po tayo nako-confuse doon. If you are being confused doon sa pag-evaluate ng ating ERD, just look for this one, no? Just look for this one at magiget po natin siya. Maintindihan po natin yung kanyang flow. Pero dito kasi wala siyang case scenario, no? Magda-draft na kasi tayo. If you're going to draft later on your ERD based doon sa exam o based doon sa database ninyo. Okay, so ganito po yung gagawin natin. Wala na siyang mga case scenarios. Okay? So this is just a simple ERD. No, we have 3 na connected. Yan. Okay? Let's proceed. Okay, so this one naman is more complicated than the other. As you can see, we have 5 entities. Palakihin lang po natin. Ayan. We have 5 entities. We have entity student, entity enrollment, entity lecturer. We also have the entity lecturer, and then we also have the entity na subject. So all in all, we have 5 na subjects. Or entities, I should say. I'm sorry. We have 5 entities, and we also have relationship here. Yung relationship natin ay enrolls. Ayan. And then we also have the relationship na lectures. Ayan. Kung papansinin ninyo, meron na tayong mga attributes. So, student, ang ating attribute ay F-name, L-name, NID, address, B-date. Ang attribute naman ng ating enrollment ay student name, and then we also have date of enrollment, course name, and then we also have the CC number. Okay. So here, let's just evaluate, no? Let's just evaluate this particular example. So here on this student, gumamit siya ng, okay, mag-base ulit po tayo dito, no? Ayan. And then, so let's check, no, ang kanyang cardinality ay many, and then ang kanyang optionality ay mandatory. And then dito sa may enrollment ay 1. Okay, so bakit kay 1? So let's start with here. Here dito sa student, a student, you know, this is just like your system. Okay, student enrollment system. A student enrolls, ayan, and then nakakonect siya sa may enrollment. Okay? Dito siya sa enroll, para hindi tayo ma-confuse, a student enrolls on a particular enrollment or is subject to enrollment. Ayan, 1. So, isang beses lang po daw dapat na mag-enroll ang ating estudyante. Okay, so for example, per SEM, 'di ba? Isang beses lang tayong mag-enroll. So, basically, for example, meron tayong dalawang tables sa isang database na ginagamit natin sa student enrollment system. So, yung table na yon ay we have the table student. And then we also have the table enrollment. So, dito sa my table student, meron siyang mga attributes. Okay, ito yung F-name, L-name, address, and birth date. Same din po dito sa my enrollment. Ito yung mga details or yung mga properties na kukunin later on. Just like the student name, date of enrollment, course name, and then CC number. Di ba pag nag-enroll po tayo, meron tayong mga details na ganito na kailangang i-fill up. At marami pa pong attributes na pwede nating ilagay dito, hindi lang po itong mga to. As you can see, ang ginamit na type dito sa my student is at least one entity. Of course, if you are going to enroll, hindi pwedeng walang mag-enroll sa isang school. There should be at least one entity. That is why ginamit dito is the cardinality na many at yung optionality na one. And then, there is only one process. Okay, so pwede tayong gumamit ng relationship or yung cardinality natin na one lang po dito. And then, as you can see, meron din tayong lecturer dito, lecturer. Yung student at saka lecturer, they are connected. By how? As you can see, ang kanilang relationship pa rin ay enrolls. And then yung enrollment, nakakonect din po dito sa may lecture natin. Same as through, ang ginamit na type po dito ay yung at least one entity. Okay, so a student enrolls to at least one lecture, and a lecture should be enrolled by at least one student. Ayan. So, many. Pwedeng many, pero hindi pwedeng mabakante. Same as through dito po, no? For the enrollment, ayan, for example, so, lecture is being enrolled to one enrollment. Ayan. And in enrollment is enrolls to one, or the enrollment process will enroll at least one lecture. Ayan, hindi pwedeng mabakante yung student natin. Dito, hindi pwedeng wala siyang lecture or wala siyang mga, under kasi ng lecture, yung mga entities natin, we have the time, date, lecture name, and then subject. Kumbaga sa ating assessment, ito po yung ating schedule. Ayan. Our assessment. Ayan. Makikita nyo kasi sa assessment kung ano yung time, date, and then subject, and then the lecturer name, no? So, sabihin natin assessment ito. Sa isang enrollment, mag-provide siya ng at least one na assessment or at least one na list of lecture. Okay, hindi pwedeng mabakante. Dito naman po, sa baba, we have the lecturer, and then we also have the subjects. Sa under ng lecturer, we have the lecturer ID, last name, first name, email, at saka ng address. And then we also have the entity na subjects. We have the subject code, subject unit, and then the subject UDSC. Okay? So, under ng entity na lecturer, yan, one lang po yung nilagay niya. So, dito sa may subjects, we also have the mandatory many. Okay, at least one entity. Kung babasahin natin, a lecturer lectures mandatory many subjects. Ganyan po natin siya basahin. Pero, sabi niya, at least one. Sa isang lecturer, sa isang teacher, meron siyang at least one na subject, no, na ituturo. Pero, pwede ring magturo siya ng madami. Pero, dito sa may subject, no, sa isang subject, dapat isa lang daw po yung lecturer na magtuturo doon. So, for example, ako, sa subject natin na, for example, yung subject natin is software engineering. Hindi naman pwede na ako yung teacher ninyo, tapos yung meron pa kayong isang teacher, no? So, dalawa kaming teacher nyo, mahihirapan kayo, maguguluhan kayo. That's why nilagay niya dito ang one. Okay? So, pwede rin natin lagyan ng additional one for the optionality, kaya magiging mandatory one. So, just browse it later on. Just check this example later on. And then, kung paano natin siya na branch out using the different of using the relationship and roles at saka lectures, and then also the different entities. Okay, so I have here an example, yung sinasabi ko kanina, na same ng shape dito sa may different types dito na na-present, no? So, ganito later on, this is also an example of an ERD, pero as you can see, wala na siya yung shape na diamond. Ayan, wala yung shape na diamond. But, ang pagkakaiba niya lang kasi is that wala siyang relationship, hindi nyo nakikita yung diamond, pero meron yung word dito. Meron pa rin yung verb po natin dito. And then, as you can see, meron tayong mga different squares, hindi na siya rectangle, meron tayong mga different squares na dito na nagre-represent ng different tables natin sa ating database na gagamitin sa system natin later on. Just for example, we have the TBL student or table student na merong mga different entities. We have the entity student na merong mga attributes. We have the student ID at saka student name. And then yung student ID dito is a primary key. We also have the entity course. Ayan. We have the attributes ng course ID and then course name. We also have the professor. Meron tayong attributes na employee ID and then professor name. Ayan. So, they are connected with each other. We have three entities. We have entities student, course, at saka professor. Please, wag po natin wag po tayong ma-confuse. We can make use of the ERD that was presented just like this one. We can make use of this way on how to create our ERD, but I think this is more convenient for us if we're going to choose or use this one. Okay? So, same lang din po yung thought niya kasi mas mabilis po yung pag-layout. Ganito po yung itsura nung ating, or this is an example of the representation of a database. Okay? So, ganito po yung mga different tables niya. If you have a background about MS Access or MySQL, ganito po yung magiging visual representation ng ating mga tables. So, let's see, no? So, considering the different attributes that was being presented here, they are also being connected with lines. Same din po doon sa typical na ERD natin. So, yung student nakakonect kay course, yung course nakakonect kay professor, and vice versa. Okay, so it says here, meron tayong relationship dito, which is a verb. Sabi niya, assigned. And then we also have delivers. As you can see, the student, course, and professor, they are singular noun. Okay, singular noun sila. Yung relationship niya ay verb. Okay, a student, yan, sabi niya, meron tayong cardinality and optionality dito. Ang cardinality ng student at saka course ay pareho, no? Which is many. And then, we also have the optionality na mandatory sa pareho din po. And then, sabi niya dito, if we're going to check it here, sabi niya, at least one entity. I repeat, at least one entity po yung nakalagay po dito sa dalawa. And then, pag sinabing at least one entity, ulitin ko lang po, hindi pwedeng mabakante kahit isa lang. Okay? Kahit madami, kahit 2 or more, basta at least meron lang isa. Hindi pwedeng mabakante. So, kung babasahin natin to, a student is assigned to mandatory many course. Ayan. So, considering yung naging relationship niya dito na mandatory many, no? Mandatory many, at least one entity. Ang isang student, at least meron siyang isang course, no? Meron siyang isang course. Yung course na sinasabi dito is a subject, ha? Kasi sometimes we consider yung subject as a course. Okay? So, yung course dito is a subject para hindi po tayo ma-confuse. This is a subject. Hindi yung course na BSIT, yung mga ganon. Hindi po. A student is being assigned to at least one course. Kaya, meron tayong mandatory many. So, isang student, no, pwede kang mag-enroll ng 2 or more. Hindi ka mako-consider na regular or na regular student or yung tawag dito, yung irregular student kung wala kang na-enroll na subject. Hindi ka mako-consider as a student. So, mandatory yan na merong isa, at least one na course na kailangan mong i-enroll. So, ito po yung thought niya. So, student is assigned to mandatory many course. And then, a course is assigned to mandatory many. Pareho lang din dito sa type niya, at least one entity. Diba sa isang subject, pwede kang mag-petition. Hindi pwedeng ma-offer yung subject na yon na walang isang estudyante. Kung walang estudyante, hindi siya ma-offer, maka-cancel siya. So, ganun po yung thought niya dito. So, a student is being assigned or assigned to a course or a subject, and a subject is being assigned to student. So, both of them has this particular type, yung first type natin, at least one entity. So, hindi pwede na mabakante po yung dalawa. Okay, going back here naman dito sa my professor at saka course, no? So, as you can see, they have a mandatory one relationship. So, they have mandatory, no? Pareho lang din sila. At ang kanyang relationship is delivers. Ito, gumamit tayo ng word na delivers. Okay, so going back, so let's start here, dito sa my professor. If we are going to check it here on the several type, or the different types, no? Sabi niya, one and only one. Nag-iisa lang dapat. I repeat, nag-iisa lang dapat. Okay, that's why gumamit tayo ng ganitong symbol. Okay, so, one professor delivers course. Mandatory one professor delivers mandatory one course. I repeat, of course, dito ay subject. Okay, so yung subject daw or yung course is being delivered by mandatory one professor. So, isang professor, hindi rin pwede na hindi siya mag-deliver ng isang subject. Matatanggal ka, no? Hindi ka mako-consider as a teacher kung wala kang subject unless on other circumstances. Pero, typically, ang isang professor, kailangan meron siyang ituro na at least one subject. At isang subject, kailangang maituro siya ng at least one professor, no? Sa isang subject, for example, gaya ng example natin kanina, example yung course natin or yung subject natin is, software engineering. Hindi pwedeng dalawa kaming magtuturo ng software engineering sa isang section. For example, sa section A, software engineering, hindi pwedeng wala ring teacher na magturo doon. Self na learning kayo na walang magsusupervise sa inyo na professor. Hindi po ganon. So, there must be at least one and only one entity. So, a professor delivers one course and the course should be delivered by a professor. So, ganun po itong example na to. And then, we can make use of this ERD or this particular ERD. So, if we are going to check it also, okay? So, this is a good example, no? Dito sa paggamit dito. Dito sa second example natin. Okay? Or sa third example natin. This is the fourth example na connected pareho lang dito sa example po natin dito. So, as you can see, meron tayo mga different, no? Mga different entities. Pero, kung i-consider natin as a symbol, doon sa ating database, these are considered as the different tables sa ating database, no? Okay, we have the table author, table publisher, table customer, table shopping basket, yung mga ganyan. So, we have 2, 4, 6, 8. We have 8, no? 8 tables that are connected with each other. But if we're going to consider it on ERD, meron tayong 8 na entities. So, entity author, entity publisher, entity customer, just something like that. And then, papansinin ninyo dito sa baba niya, parang database talaga siya. Kasi, meron na tayong name for our attribute, and then meron din siyang data type at yung value kung ilan, no? Yung length ng ating value. For example, we have here the name, which is a varchar and has a length of 255. And as you can see, meron tayong symbol na key dito, which is a primary key. Okay? So, ganito na po yung pwede nating gawin, no? Mas, kasi siya, mas organized compared dito sa typical na ERD na ganito. Okay? Yung author dito, ipakita ko lang po, yung author po dito na example dito na author na table or entity, same din po dito pag ganito po yung pinagawa natin. Pag author, yung attributes niya lang ay gagawin natin ganito yung mga symbols niya. If I'm going to use either the first one, kung iyan or ito yung gagamitin ko, I am most comfortable with this one. Mas maganda, mas organized siya tignan. So as you can see, marami din silang mga connections with each other. And then, we also have the different attributes para sa publisher, something like that. We also have the books. And then, as you can see, meron din silang mga lines that connect, okay, that connect with each other. And then, as you can see, wala nga lang silang mga different verbs or yung relationship, but they have here the different types, no, for us to check later on. So we have the optional many, and then we also have the one. Okay, so as you can see, we have the different relationships with each other. Okay, so all you have to do later on is to check on it, because same lang din po dito sa mga examples na binigay ko. They have the same explanations and they have the same thought. They just differ in simple. So binapakita ko lang po sa inyo yung example nung ganito. Okay, nung typical example natin dito. Just a simple example, this one. And then, if you're going to create an ERD later on for your system, you may do it like this. Okay? Either this one or this one. So, it is up to you na po kung alin po dyan ang pipiliin nyo. Okay, so I think we have reached the final example about the entity relationship diagram. If you're going to mix or if you are going to join now the different cardinalities, the different optionality, and of course the relationship. We also applied here the basics of ERD, wherein we make use of the different symbols for notations, and then we make use of the different components of ERD, which are the entities. Yan, we have the entities, the relationship. We also have the different components. We make use also of the different keys. We have the primary key and foreign key, the key attributes, and then we make use also of the different symbols that I presented, no, which represents the different or the several types for that is being used in our optionality. So if you're going to create your own ERD later on, just make sure to evaluate it properly, especially the different entities and the relationships, and you need to base your answer here, okay, here on the different or the several types that was being presented. So this is the final part of our two-part discussion on the entity relationship diagram. So I hope you learned something new today. I hope you understood. So I hope you already knew how to evaluate a simple ERD and to create an ERD later on in the near future. So if you have any questions, if you have any clarifications, especially in the creation and evaluation of the entity relationship diagram, do not hesitate to ask me, and I will try my best to explain them, or I will try my best to answer them. Okay, so this ends our discussion for the topic 3, which is all about the entity relationship diagram. I hope you learned something today. Good day and God bless.